Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, why would anyone follow you on Twitter after what you did tonight?
I don't know why anyone follows me on Twitter, like, generally. So, I don't really have a good answer.
I suppose that's fair. For those who do not follow Arif, and count yourself lucky.
Among the lucky many.
Yeah. Arif went nuts in turning Ian Book into a fantastic running meme, and just I hate you for most of them, and I admit that I laughed at a couple of the puns. I will admit that.
Well, yeah. So you sarcastically asked me what are your 3 favorite ones, and I sent you my 3 favorite ones and one of my favorite replies, and you laughed at all of them. So obviously, I was killing it.
No, I laughed at the one. That was all I did. I didn't laugh at the last of the Mohicans. I was like, wow. But
okay, so that one was more. It was better more because it was impressive than it was because it was funny.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was impressive. But you laughed at more than one.
Yeah, well, I'll have to check the tape on that. Welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. Hope you guys had a fun and fantastic and warm ? Holiday season. I only say that because I drove both ways through a blizzard today, and I wasn't particularly pleased either time I did it. So, but hope you guys are all doing well. We will be covering the Rams' loss in a non-traditional way. We usually do one of these once a year, where we turn it into just a full-on mailbag for the entire episode. So all the Viking stuff is stacked up front. Stuff about the game specifically is up front, and off-topic stuff tends to be toward the end of the show. But I want to warn everyone who's listening to this right now who may think about turning it off or at some point, like, okay, it's starting to veer off. We will be revisiting Arif's Beekeeping Corner this episode. So, if there's a reason to stick around, by God, this is it. So, again, thank you guys for listening to Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. If you enjoy the show and would like to help donate to the show to help us stay ad-free, help keep the Loch Ness Monster at bay, get bonus episodes up at patreon.com/NorseCode, where you can donate $3.50 per month, and that will give you access to bonus stuff. Also gives you access to things like Zoom watch-alongs and stuff like that when we do them. So check that out. I want a special thanks to Stephen Adams, who said, didn't see an option for a sign-up message, but figured I would sign up finally on Patreon as a future apology for when I move to Minneapolis soon and bother you. Looking forward to subjecting Arif to dinner with my children in January.
Oh, good.
Yeah, this was the fellow who was trying to figure out the best way to torture his children.
Oh, okay, yeah, great. Now, we'll get along famously then.
Yeah, this will work well. So, thank you so much, Stephen Adams. Appreciate you joining up. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well in order to donate to the show. It's more of a one-time donation. Or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up your Norse Code attire, including the Arif materials that you gave to your brother, and I gave the socks to my brother, and I think my brother had the more understated reaction, but he was legitimately confused.
my brother was he felt compelled to be polite in his response.
That's for somebody who works in politics,
sarcastically polite, I guess.
The fact that he put on, there was video of this that was captured. At one point, he put on an Arif mask, and it didn't appear that he knew that that's, that the logo was on there as well. That was fantastic. I enjoyed that thoroughly. So again, check that out over at norsecode.threadless.com. If you'd like some of the merchandise up there. Again, we don't make much off of it, but every little bit helps and helps keep the show ad-free and all of that. So thank you guys so much for supporting us this year. Thank you guys so much for listening to the show, for telling friends about it. We really do appreciate it. And let's get into this non-traditional review Again, we usually do an all mailbag show once a year or once every 2 years, and this game warrants it. You know why? Because why on earth would you want to cover this game normally? Like what about this game inspires you to go, well, if we look at the offensive side of the ball right now. No, there's a couple of major questions that exist as a result of this loss. There's questions as to the direction of the team. There's questions as to Justin Jefferson's frustrations, rightfully so. There's all sorts of things that we're going to end up talking about here. Again, we've linked up most of the game stuff right at the beginning here. And the first thing that Kenneth Allen wants to know is, did anyone manage to figure out what the deal with Harrison Smith's penalty was? He was called for unsportsmanlike conduct, although the NFL's site listed it as unnecessary roughness. But everyone is pretty sure he wasn't even on the field. Did the pool reporter even ask the ref?
Yeah, so I wish I could have gotten like a better understanding of the way that the media reacted to it in real time in the stadium, because obviously I'm not there at the moment, and so it would have been kind of nice to see if somebody was going to send a pool reporter down. I did a little bit of digging. I texted a couple of people who were there, and it sounds like he got the flag for yelling at the ref for missing like a block in the back or something like that in the punt return touchdown. So that would be an unsportsmanlike conduct. The fact that it was listed as unnecessary roughness would be incorrect. That kind of tracks, because that is the kind of unsportsmanlike conduct that would put you on a one strike, on the 2-strike rule that gets you ejected. So that kind of makes sense. That follows. But yeah, that's my understanding. I don't know if that's like 100% the case. Never got like 100% clarity on that, but I guess Harrison Smith was one unsportsmanlike conduct penalty away from getting ejected. So now you know.
And he ended up kind of limping off at one point. Is he? Do we know anything about anything involving injury, or is it too early in the week to know anything?
It's a little too early in the week to know. I think we'll know on Wednesday when the injury report comes out. We're probably not going to get any other indication from the team. They usually don't do anything on Tuesdays. So for now, it doesn't seem like it's a big deal. I mean, he did come back. So probably, we'll find out with Adam Thielen, with Harrison Smith. I would expect that both would be kind of fully ready to go by the time, the Packers game rolls around.
All right, the other question that Kenneth Allen has is how efficient were the Rams' rushes, and how efficient is running against Minnesota this season generally? Because it seems like we might be towing the line where the rushes are actually fairly efficient, and thus a scheme change can't be the answer to the original question.
So I looked into this a little bit. I used RBs Don't Matter, or rbsdm.com, to kind of figure out the EPA for play stuff, to figure out kind of base efficiency and stuff. The thing is, so in this particular game, the Rams obviously were remarkably efficient running the ball. If they weren't, they wouldn't have done anything, because Stafford was awful all day. If you take a look at what the most efficient defense is to throw against, right? So if you were a quarterback looking to rack up stats, what defense would you want to play against? You would want to play against the Washington football team defense, which kind of, like, despite the fact that they've got a ton of talent up front, or did at the beginning of the season, they're just a sieve. The Jacksonville Jaguars defense, not a surprise, and the New York Jets defense. So they give up about 0.25 expected points per dropback. So that's quite a bit, right? That nearly a point every 4 times you drop back to pass. The Rams running the ball were able to get 0.3 expected points per run. So they were more efficient than it would be to pass it, or than the average quarterback passed against the New York Jets, the worst passing defense in the league. So it was a remarkably efficient running game. And it wasn't just, big plays. They also had a really high success rate. Their success rate running the ball was over 50%, which Adrian Peterson did not have a 50% running rate in his 2012 season, right? Like, if you take a look at the most consistent rushing defense to take advantage of, that would be the LA Chargers. And they give up a success rate running the ball of about 47, 48%. The Rams were at 52% or so in terms of running the ball. And so they're one of the only instances where you have the ability to run the ball and you gain expected points more often than you lose them. And so they were able to stay on schedule running the ball, which typically is actually not the case. Like, very often you won't be able to stay on schedule running the ball nearly every play. So there's that. Now, the Vikings' run defense has been bad this year. I think it's like 25th in the NFL in terms of rushing EPA, but it is still net negative to run against the Vikings defense than it is to pass against the Vikings defense, even though the Vikings defense has a top 8 passing defense. So even though the Vikings have a much better passing defense than they do a running defense, it is typically still better to throw the ball. There's only one team this year where it has been more efficient, at least historically, probably won't be going forward. It'll probably just regress out. There's only one team this year where it's been more efficient to run the ball than it is to throw it, and that's the Dallas Cowboys. And that's just because Trevon Diggs keeps snagging interceptions, and it changes kind of the dropback EPA of passes. So in this case, it's the Rams were just uniquely good at running the ball. Had they run the ball more, I imagine those numbers would drop more than we would see them continue. But it probably would have been a worse game. It's just the fact that Stafford was so awful really was the only reason that this was technically a one-score game. And of course, people who watch it know that it wasn't close like one-score games are, right? Because the Vikings had to do an onside kick and they didn't recover it and so forth. So, there's only one team where it's still more effective to run the ball than throw the ball, and that's mostly because of how awful it has been to throw the ball against Dallas more than anything else.
So the Vikings defense was just being carved up this week, and like watching that last drive, that last like real drive that ended up going for a field goal by the Rams was just a picture in efficiency, and really just a picture of everything that's wrong with the Vikings and the run defense this year.
Yeah, well, what's kind of interesting is that the first 2 plays were running plays that they had stopped up. It was 3rd and 6, so they'd stopped those 2 running plays for a combined total of 4 yards or 2 yards per play. Third down, the Vikings defense is good on third down. At that point, the Rams were just under 50%, like something like 46% or something like that on third down. So better than an average team, but still not doing well because the Vikings happen to be pretty good on third down defensively. And then they reel off a 37-yard pass to Cooper Kupp over Mackenzie Alexander. And that, I think, was kind of the back-breaking throw, right? Because that was a 6-minute drive, but it could have been a 3-and-out or something close to a 3-and-out. I think that occurred on the third play, but if it didn't, something approximating a 3-and-out that wouldn't have taken up that long. And that's when the Rams start kind of bleeding clock in a really serious way, running the ball and making the run defense numbers look better than they actually are, first of all. But second, really positioning themselves to take the win by draining as much clock as possible and then taking that field goal. So that was the biggest kind of play in the final drive there. The Vikings run defense, if they had been able to force them to kick sooner, that would have changed the way that the subsequent drives worked out for Minnesota and stuff like that. And so there were problems there. But what's interesting is that the thing that failed them the most was their passing defense in that particular instance. But yeah, throughout the game, we saw big runs churned out by Sony Michel. Throughout, we saw Darrell Henderson even do a little bit. So yeah, and it's tough because the Vikings had both Michael Pierce and Dalvin Tomlinson back. They had edge rushers who were probably a little bit better at defending the run than they are in generating pressure, and Sheldon Richardson, DJ Wanham. They had, the guy that everyone says was snapped from going to the Pro Bowl, Eric Kendricks. They had Anthony Barr back, and it kind of didn't matter. Part of it is because Mackenzie Alexander's not playing well against the run, but part of it's also that Eric Kendricks had another bad game. I mean, he's had a couple of bad games, even if you discount the one where he was ejected. Anthony Barr actually had a pretty good game. Michael Pierce, I thought, had a pretty good game. I thought Dalvin Tomlinson, I think his highlight plays were fantastic. I think his lowlights were a bit worrisome. And then, of course, when you rotate in the new defensive line to give Tomlinson and Pierce a rest, they got run all over too. And Nick Vigil got run into a couple of times, and he wasn't able to make the most of his opportunities. So, there were a lot of problems there in terms of run defense that really kind of changed the outcome of the game. Or changed is a weird word to use, but it really kind of cemented how much it didn't matter that Matt Stafford was having a bad day.
It was amazing to watch Anthony, this was one of the, I just want to call it, this was an all-time Anthony Barr performance as far as getting around the ball. And obviously you get 2 interceptions, you can call it that, but he just seemed to be in the right place at the right time a couple of times there. But the Vikings wasted the Anthony Barr revenge game.
Yeah, it would have been so fun to talk about it because then you can contrast it against the 2018 performance where he gave up 3 touchdowns. He's matched up on receivers twice. He got burned on a fake ankle wrap by Todd Gurley in the red zone. Like that game was so bad that it kind of defined, honestly, the Anthony Barr narrative for Vikings fans for the rest of his career as a Viking. I mean, it wasn't like he was doing perfectly before the game. He had struggled in some respects. And in fact, the prior season, he was actually struggling a lot. It was either the prior season or the season before, but I think it was the prior season where he was struggling a lot. And, there's conversations about, whether Anthony Barr was coasting, I think is a word that Mike Zimmer used at one point. But I think the narrative really kind of took off and solidified itself as a result of that game, which of course is unfair, right? Because while he should be expected to be able to cover Todd Gurley, who really just beat him because of the way that the Vikings kind of revealed their tendencies on film more than it was Anthony Barr's individual talent. It was a check that put a receiver on a linebacker multiple times in a row. That's not really Anthony Barr's fault. It's not his job to cover a linebacker. But either way, it kind of cemented what people thought about him for a while. And so this would have been a really remarkable way for him to kind of get it back, right? The 2 picks, the quarterback hit. I think he had other pressures besides the quarterback hit. He had 6 to 8 tackles or something like that. Like he had a phenomenal game. And this would have been a really fun way to kind of reinsert that Anthony Barr back into, the collective consciousness. But instead, the Vikings just really waste all their opportunities. In fact, the piece that's going up at The Athletic tomorrow morning is going to be about how the Vikings wasting opportunities in this game is very similar to the Vikings have wasted opportunities all year. It's the game becomes kind of a microcosm of the season. So, it kind of sucks because this being the Anthony Barr game was really perfect in a lot of ways.
And let's not forget, this is likely going to be the last season of Anthony Barr in Minnesota. So, this is it, man. You're not getting any more of this. It's Anthony Barr has been here for more than a few years, and he's likely going to move on, and has basically said as much. It sucks. Anthony Barr in the past game hasn't been great, but he has been good at coming down with interceptions when they get knocked off at the line like that. So, and the Vikings were having a lot of success hitting the ball up when it was they were Kirk Cousinsing him.
They were.
Yeah, all the deflections. It was perfect.
Yeah. Barr did a really good job of corralling in those picks, which, turned out to be really important because it looked like, nobody was able to catch a pick for a while until later on in the game when somebody besides Anthony Barr was able to snag it.
Man, it looked like we should have had at least 5 by the end of the game. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. If you look at, turnover-worthy plays from Pro Football Focus, so that is designed to accord blame, so it does not count any of the pass deflections as turnover-worthy plays. But if you count it up, there were 4, right, according to Pro Football Focus. And then I don't think they counted the Cameron Bynum dropped pick because that would have been 5. And then you count the 2 pass deflections, one of which turned into a pick, so then there's 6. So I think to me there were 7 opportunities to generate a pick in that game, and the Vikings converted 3 of them, which is normally fine, but in this context was kind of pathetic. There were all kinds of turnover opportunities. This is probably the worst game that Matthew Stafford's had in a long, long time. And he played for the Lions. That says a lot.
Yeah. He's used to playing poorly against the Vikings and everything, but this seemed to be on another level for a little while. It was almost too good. It was stupid. Why? Sorry. I'm just sad about this season at this point, because as a result of this loss, the Vikings are basically out of the playoffs. There's still a path. It's just not a good one. And involves the Vikings winning out, which, I mean, really?
Right. If the Vikings win their next 2 games, which of course requires that they somehow sweep both Chicago and Green Bay, both of which have been difficulties in terms of their capability of sweeping for seemingly entirely different reasons. But if they win both Chicago and Green Bay, they have a greater than 50% chance of making the playoffs, which sucks because if you win out, you kind of hope that the answer is that it guarantees that you're in. But no, they've got a greater than 50% chance of making the playoffs. It helps that the Saints lost this game in stultifying, awful fashion, by the way. And so the odds have moved up since then. I haven't really played around with 538 too much since then, but they do have good odds. I think that they need some Eagles losses in order to make it, which means, I guess cheering for Dallas in week 18. And they might need losses either from the 49ers, who look like they've turned into a pumpkin, or somebody else. I haven't paid too much attention, but 2 more wins from the Vikings, and we continue to have this playoff discussion, which is exhausting. But like, I think if you qualify for the playoffs, the NFL makes you play. So there's nothing
as it turns out.
Yeah, you can't just be like, I don't really deserve to be here. I'm good.
You know what? I want the 49ers to be that team. They just go, you know what? We're frauds. We're good, actually. We're going to leave Jimmy on the tarmac in Nashville and call it good.
Yeah.
Let's just move on from that and call it good. Let's talk about the end of the game. Damian Barrett asks, what do the analytics nerds say about kicking field goals before going for a TD when down 10? All of the Vikes and the Cardinals. Is the logic sound, or is this just further proof that the Hell League has integrated itself with head coaches looking to maximize for potential kicking pain, rather?
So I don't know that we have a ton of data on this for. So there's a ton of different types of analytics. I mention this every so often. So it's not fair to kind of group all the processes and methods together. But the ones that are kind of most prominent on Twitter, like Ben Baldwin and Lee Sharp and Frisco Josh and people like them, will use a lot of play-by-play data and historical data to help kind of construct their models. And that's one approach that is not as useful here because it's tough to model that out using historical data, although I'm sure that they have an answer and I haven't been able to find it. But here I think that there's other kinds of analytical modeling that those kind of nerds can come up with that uses treats play-by-play like a Markov chain and stuff like that. There's other ways to do it that give you kind of good probabilities. And so I think the difference with the Vikings and the Cardinals is that the Cardinals did it when they were, they had like the 1 or something like that. Like they were like within yards of the goal line, right? And that's dumb because it is difficult to get that close to the goal line. And your opportunities to score are so limited, score a touchdown are so limited that your likelihood of scoring a touchdown and then recovering the outside and kicking a field goal from like literally whatever distance are greater, even though Prater's having an awful game, are larger than kicking this chip shot that can account for the fact that Prater's having an awful game and then marching down the field and scoring a touchdown. I think that there are a couple of the analytics firms, I think Edge Sports chimed in and was like, this doesn't make any sense. So I didn't like that. The Vikings is a different scenario because they kicked from distance and they did it so that they could have as much time on the clock as possible. And I kind of understand this one. I don't know what the numbers say, one way or the other. I think that there's a good argument that they shouldn't have done it because as the offense is going and you know the down and distance and stuff like that, how many opportunities are you going to get from where you are? You might as well try to score more points sooner. But I think the logic here is that if you kick now, you know how much time is left on the clock when you recover it, and you can work with that time to try and score a touchdown, and you can modulate your play calling around that time. So I understand that. I don't know if it's kind of the right one by various models, but that one I understand. The Cardinals one does not make sense to me at all because you are giving up your chance of scoring a touchdown, which I think the Cardinals kicked on 3rd down, right? So they were giving up 2 plays essentially. And that is the same problem as the go for 2 problem essentially, because coaches won't go for 2 down 8 because if they miss it, they're out of the game essentially. Now they're down 9, or I should say they won't go for 2 down like 15 or whatever when they score a touchdown because if they miss it right then and there, then they're out of the game, and now you're playing a good chunk of the game knowing that you're dead. Whereas if you kick the field goal or kick the extra point, you're in it for longer, but your odds of winning have decreased. You just know sooner whether or not you win. And the goal of any football game is to win. It's not to think that you've got a chance of winning for as long as possible. It's to win. And here I think the Cardinals were committing that sin, essentially. They were committing that problem, which was, well, if you kick the field goal now and you make it, you still have a chance to win. Whereas if for our next two plays, we attempt to score a touchdown, we don't make it, we know we've lost. That's it. We cannot win the game. And so the next 5 minutes of play or the next minute of play or whatever will be done without a chance to win. And so it's not, they didn't play what odds of winning were better. They played what odds of extending the game and feeling like you're still in it were better. And those are two different things. Here, the Vikings, I think, made a decision that was close enough that I don't think there's an obvious answer. And I would like to kind of ask about it, but for all the game management stuff that Zimmer gets wrong, kind of one of the things that he didn't mismanage in this game was that did not seem egregious to me. So, great.
Could have gone better. Could have gone a lot worse. My problem with the whole situation was the idea of putting our lovely kicker, whose wife has not left him, but maybe you could have told him that before he was going to go out and do the kick. You're asking somebody, has he even had a recovered onside kick once in his career?
I mean, this is like his first full season. He was like a backup 2 years ago. That's the last time I've seen the field. So I'm not going to look it up, and I'm going to say it was yes. You can't. Either instance requires an onside kick, and that's because the defense gave up a 6-minute drive.
It's just annoying to watch the season go away on that. And I don't have any faith in the Vikings this season anyway. I've been preaching it for months now that the Vikings are not to be trusted and all that. The idea that this was going to have to come down to an onside kick from a quasi-reliable kicker anyway, boy, that didn't scream we believe, or that didn't scream like something you should truly believe in there. It was just rough. Also from Damian Barrett, having just played a Super Bowl, sadly we lost the linear Norse code title, we have another one this weekend. Is this the first instance of a team playing back-to-back Super Bowls? And had we beaten the Rams, would the league have been unifying the belts like in boxing or the WWE?
So the Vikings-Packers game is not a Super Bowl at the moment of play. It only becomes a Super Bowl once we know the result. And that is metaphysically tough, but it's very easy when you think about it in terms of the way Packers fans think about this accusation that the Vikings won their Super Bowl. Because the corollary to their argument is that the Packers don't think of this game as their Super Bowl. They think of the Super Bowl as their Super Bowl, which
suckers
would mean that the Vikings have won more Super Bowls than the Packers, of course. That would then mean that if the Packers win, we still only have one Super Bowl trophy. It's being held by the Rams right now. If the Vikings win, now we have two Super Bowl trophies. And you could either make the argument that because the Vikings have, quote unquote, won their Super Bowl, that the other one disintegrates, it evaporates, it doesn't exist anymore because there can only be one Super Bowl and the Vikings have it. And so they have the trophy again. And so that way they can always recuperate a Super Bowl every year. The other argument is now that there's two floating trophies around. The problem with that is that those trophies can continue multiplying because next year they'll play the Packers twice as well. And they'll only multiply in the case of a Vikings win. We don't know how often that's going to happen going forward. But, if they win, one Packers game every year for the next couple of years, now we've got a ton of floating Super Bowl trophies that we don't know what to do with. Now, some of them will converge, right? If the Vikings win their Super Bowl here and then they beat the Bears and then they go into the playoffs and then they meet the Rams in the playoffs, they'll have been able to reunite the trophies essentially, and that just travels with them. But yeah, this is something that we're going to have to figure out in terms of linear Norse code Super Bowl traveling trophy. I don't like either answer too much, right? Because I don't like the idea that eventually there's going to be 5 different Super Bowls, 7 different Super Bowls to track. But I don't like the idea of the Rams' Super Bowl just kind of wafting into the wind as soon as the Vikings beat the Packers,
You could just give all of these extra Super Bowl titles to Reggie Bush. Like
Right.
Reggie could
Who
use a
deserves,
little
yeah.
bit. Yeah, Reggie could use a little bit of love in his trophy case.
Yeah. Heisman participant, Reggie Bush.
Of all like the longest running jokes on this show,
That one's an actual long running joke that actual long time listeners of the show will actually understand what we're talking about.
the dumbest thing. But I do like that we got to revisit it earlier this year. I enjoyed that. Also, Scholar whatever asks, what is our path back to the linear Super Bowl now? You got to wait till next year. The schedule hasn't
James,
been printed next year.
They very well could meet the Rams in the playoffs, so long as the Rams don't lose. In which case, they could meet whoever the Rams lose to in the playoffs.
Boy, I don't know if I've ever had less confidence. No, you know what? I take that back. The Joe Webb Green Bay game was pretty no confidence as far as a playoff game is concerned. But
and they exceeded your expectations.
Certainly did. Still did. Let's go to Kevin, who asked, why did this Rams game feel surprising to me? How come it took so long to figure out this is a 500 squad? Also, how come the run defense is trash? Do we need more nose tackles?
Yeah, well, as to that first question, whether the Rams game feels surprising to you, sounds like a you problem. I don't know, Kevin. I feel like we did a pretty good job preparing you that the Rams are a pretty good team. But yeah, the Vikings are a volatile team. So they're a 500 squad because they're always playing down to the level of their opponent. If you're exactly as good as the team you're playing across, notable exceptions include the game against Seattle, the game against Chicago, and this game against the Rams. But if you're playing basically every game exactly as good as your opponent, you'll be a 500 team, right? So I don't know why it took you so long. Maybe you've got a belief or a faith, or you can construct scenarios really easily in your head. I don't know, man. That seems like you have to listen to the show more. That's my only prescription. As for
boy, there's a damning idea.
Yeah, that's too bad. Take 2 a week. How come the run defense is trash? A lot of reasons. I think some of it has to do with the fact that Eric Kendricks isn't playing as well as he should be. I think some of it has to do with the fact that for most of the year you've been cycling out defensive tackles and defensive ends. This year, of course, this game, of course, you did have Dalvin Thomas and Michael Pierce back, but would have probably helped to have Daniil Hunter, Everson Griffin back there in run defense. I don't know how much. I mean, Eric Kendricks just struggled, right? And so it's tough to kind of pin it on any one player. It would have been nice to see, for example, Xavier Woods pull the trigger faster on a couple of plays and shoot the gap. It would have been nice to see Mackenzie Alexander get on the right side of an outside sweep. But there's kind of a lot of reasons that the run defense just isn't working. Part of it is just that as much as Mike Zimmer says he prioritizes run defense, he's very clearly a coordinator that cares much more about defending the pass than against the run, which has been good, right? Like that's how coordinators should think of it. But that's how he thinks. It's just not what he says. And so we think, the Vikings very much like to stop the run. Like, hey, they like to get these nose tackles, and they've got 2 nose tackles they play side by side. Of course they're thinking about stopping the run. And then it turns out that they, at one point in the season, were top 3 against the pass and bottom 3 against the run. Both of those have converged just a little bit, but like that's who the Vikings are. That's who Mike Zimmer is.
All right, let's go to the next question here, and that's from Ike's Vikes, who asks, in the crunch moments of this game and season in general, our defense has been unable to make plays needed to get off the field, whether it's the last 2 minutes of each half, third downs, etc. Is this due to scheme, or are guys simply not making plays in clutch moments?
I mean, there's a little bit of kind of everything involved. I think one thing is that the Vikings don't play within their scheme in the final moments of a half, and so they will stop doing a lot of stuff that's worked for them. I think that they reduce their blitz rate pretty significantly in order to kind of guard against big plays. They will play, I think, a lot more traditional zone than they will their man match zone. That's been pretty effective for them in being able to, in terms of being able to pick up, receivers and stuff like that. So defensively, I think it's that they kind of move away from the stuff that works for them. Although, the totality of it, I don't know, because the Vikings still remain the worst end of the first half 2-minute defense in the history of the NFL by a good margin. Although their number has improved. It has not improved enough to move them out of the top one of 700 teams in that scenario. So that's one of many reasons, I'm sure. As for offensively, I don't think it's a scheme thing. Play calling does play a role. Kubiak has had some really good games this year. He's had some really bad games this year. But I think just in terms of the way Cousins plays, he plays every down kind of the same. And I think the best example of that is the throw to Alexander Madison in the flat on 3rd and 6 at the goal line, or 3rd and goal at the 6-yard line. Same thing. The throw went to his outside, and he was tackled immediately at the line of scrimmage. We asked, like, hey, it looked like the ball slipped out of your hands. Why'd you throw it to him? It was like 3rd down. What's going on? Did that ball go where you wanted it to go? And he said, yes, that's exactly where I wanted it to go. And the issue is, like, okay, Madison catches that. Then what? Then nothing. You're not going to score on that play. It was 3rd down. Maybe the Vikings go for it on 4th down, but you're just not creating an interesting. You're just creating the same play again for 4th down. So that's not a good throw to make. But in terms of, like, if that's 1st and 10, and you make that throw, if Madison catches that, there's a good chance he turns upfield and gets a couple of yards before getting. And that's a fine 1st down throw if none of the other reads are open. But on 3rd down, in the red zone, that's not it. And he did mention that maybe he should have waited a second for Jefferson to pop open in the corner route. But yeah, for the most part, I think it's that Cousins processes situations kind of the same throughout the game. And so he can't adjust to how the changes in the game demand changes in his style of play. So I think that's part of it. Again, I don't know every reason why the offense falters in the final 2 minutes, just like I don't know every reason the defense does, but I think that plays a big role.
Well, let's go to the next question, because we're going to go to the offensive side of the ball here. Dr. Aaron Matson asks, it looks like Darisaw had a pretty good PFF grade. Does that match your evaluation?
Most of my rewatch of the game was to try and pick up on key moments and see kind of what was going wrong or right for the Vikings in those key moments. So I didn't get to, in my rewatch, pay too much attention to Darisaw, but in my initial viewing, I thought that he was playing really well. I thought Cleveland was playing actually decently well when he wasn't lined up against Aaron Donald. So for the most part, I thought the left side of the line did a good job. So that does kind of match up. I think that the PFF has only had like one negative game, I want to say, for Christian Darisaw. So you're in like a really good spot with him. In terms of like what his like rookie grades tell you going forward, what it's going to be for him. But what I initially saw in the game, without like a deep review of what he did, I liked. So that, I think that means like he's had, obviously he missed the pair of weeks, but I think that the last 4 games he played, because he played Green Bay and then San Francisco, and then he was out. And then he played last week against Chicago, where his PFF grade was higher than my personal evaluation of his game. I thought he didn't play up to that grade. It's also his highest grade of the season, so that's it's definitely worth me taking a look at that. Notably, though, it's a lower pass blocking grade. And then this game, which he graded pretty well. Those last 4 games, I think all should have pretty good PFF grades. And so if you're invested in trying to find an arc to try and see how he's done over the course of the season, it's a story of essentially him getting gradually better over the weeks and him hitting 70 plus or whatever it is the last 4 games that he's played. So, yeah, I like what I saw of him.
So Aaron Donald was a machine out there. That man is dangerous. That man made some serious plays and made a lot of offensive linemen look really foolish.
Yeah, he's not bad. Yeah, he knows how to play football. What's interesting is that that was not his most effective game of the season.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, that's a good word to use to describe that fact. He was more effective against Arizona. He was more effective against Jacksonville. He did more maybe against Seattle, certainly against Indianapolis. So this barely cracks the top half of games for him, which, God almighty. This is a terrifying human. So he ends up with, I want to say 7 pressures in the game. One of them a sack, one of them a hit, and 5 hurries. He ends up in the backfield a ton. He forces at least a one fumble, if I remember right. He had 5 stops, one of them in the passing game, one of them as a sack, and I think the rest were in the running game. And he was able to do some serious damage to the Vikings' effectiveness running the ball. Like Christ, right? Like it was awful. I mean, we saw what he did to Tom Compton. If you, I think I was still able to access the old PFF grade system too. But if you take a look at Tom Compton's grades before and after he played against Aaron Donald, it is like Aaron Donald flicked off a switch, right? Like Compton was playing well for the first time in his career, not like elite or like even a good, but like above average for a guard for like 5 or 6 games. Like all of those grades were like fine. Then he plays Aaron Donald and gets victimized, I want to say for like 8 pressures alone in that matchup. And then every single grade he has is like below 50. Like it's all like Garrett Bradbury's worst nightmare grades again and again and again and again for like the rest of the season. It's like playing against Aaron Donald got inside his head and ate his mind.
What's sad is that's not wrong.
Yeah,
like that's a real like. It's not okay. Compton was perfectly fine.
Yeah, and I hated that signing. I was like, this is just a favor to Kirk Cousins' agent. They're friends. This doesn't make any sense. I hated it, and I was like, yeah, he's not playing too bad. He's all right. And then, like, he saw what Infinity had in store for him. He saw what kind of spec he was against the cosmos of the universe. Like, goodness.
The Upright Citizens Brigade's bucket of truth was out there on the 50-yard line, and he was dumb enough to look inside and scream, "Don't you think I already know that?" Like, it was terrible. Oh my God. Well, let's talk about Kirk Cousins for a moment. And before we actually get to the question, I keep getting frustrated by the whole Cousins experience. And
who doesn't?
I know, right? Like it's kind of par for the course at this point. There were some very late throws that Kirk was missing on, and a lot of plays that it seemed like, well, it's the story of Kirk Cousins. There was somebody open up there, but you ended up taking the short shot.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of that. I think the worst part, I shouldn't say the worst part, what aggravates that problem in this specific game is that as the Vikings were moving back into the bootleg play action stuff, they hadn't really been doing all that much this year. It was really effective for them, in 2019 until they ran into Green Bay strategy against it and San Francisco strategy against it to always send a person after the quarterback, regardless of whether it was a run or a bootleg play action, which the Vikings have like modified what that play looks like. They give Cousins a little bit more protection on those plays and stuff like that. But like to go back to that, it looked like on those plays, he no longer had the timing that he originally had back when we watched the 2019 stuff. Like, because when the 2019 Kirk Cousins play action stuff was rolling, it was so good. It was really good looking. It was on time. It was exactly where it needed to be. It was aggressive. It was, well placed, and it was doing kind of everything that you need a play action offense to do when you've got an opportunity to run the ball and have that threat. He was able to operate within that structure. And in this game, it seems like he didn't really understand. And maybe the receivers didn't, right? Because maybe it's a receiver issue. Justin Jefferson didn't actually operate that much out of play action, given that they didn't do it as much in 2020 as they did in 2019 and 2018. But it seemed like the timing between him and the receivers was off on a lot of these throws. And so in addition to his preference for taking a lot of these shorter, easier throws in this game, when he was looking deep, he didn't seem to trust what he was looking at and didn't seem to trust the timing of those routes. And so you end up with a lot of plays where receivers are dropping passes that, like, if you look at that individual throw, right? Like, let's say the slant, was it a slant to Justin Jefferson that was thrown a little bit behind him that he drops midway through the field? I think it was in the third quarter. On like that specific play, you think, okay, well, that was behind him. That's a tough throw to make. That's kind of on both of them. And then you see the one earlier in the game that he threw to Justin Jefferson on like the deep route. He threw it behind Jefferson because he expected Jefferson to sit against the zone, according to the announcers. And I think that's actually correct. I think the announcers were maybe right on that. And Jefferson kept going, and so he has to reach behind him. And again, if like maybe if Cousins is wrong about the route Jefferson has to run in that instance, then it's on both of them a little bit. But they add up that happened with KJ Osborne, both on a pick and on a non-pick. And you see that the timing isn't working for whatever reason. And a lot of that is on the receiver, and a lot of that is on Cousins. But really, honestly, it should have happened far less, right? Like each individual instance is understandable, but in aggregate, seeing that happen so often is not understandable. And there was something kind of like really wrong about the offense. A lot of it, I think, has to do with Cousins, but I also think the receivers underperformed when they had opportunities too. And so it's really, it magnifies that frustration because the few times he does take a deep shot, or the few times he does seem to understand what's being asked of him on that play, he hesitates and the window closes for that play to turn from an okay play to a good play or a good play to a great play. And so now all you're left with are these like check downs to a running back on 3rd and 6 that's going to go nowhere near the goal line. You're forced to kick a field goal, right? That's what you're left with. And that's what like really makes that frustration, I think, a little bit more palpable because, Cousins is in an unwillingness to kind of test the limits of an opposing defense. And I understand like Jalen Ramsey might be the best cornerback in the NFL, right? I mean, the Vikings have played a number of people who are competing for that spot, including Trevon Diggs. But Jalen Ramsey is in that conversation. He's doing a really great job keeping up with Justin Jefferson. But that end zone play should have been a shot in the corner of the end zone where only it would have been Jefferson or nobody, kind of like a fade. But instead he throws it short. So yeah, Cousins was very kind of mechanical in the way that he approached this game. In a game where you've got, a significant portion of it is a 2-score deficit, that's not going to be enough. I mean, Cousins had a really phenomenal fourth quarter drive that brought them within 1 score. And I understand, people will say, hey, where was that before? And then other people will say, well, that can't have happened before because of this, that, and the other thing. And they're kind of right. But like, where was the urgency and the aggressiveness? Because if the Vikings have the capability to get open on those routes, I don't think the Rams gave up or anything like that. So if the Vikings have the ability to get open on those routes and Cousins has the ability to throw them, then they should be orienting their offense around that a little bit more when the run game's not working and they're falling 2 scores behind. So, there's a lot of frustrating things about the way the passing game works. And it's even more frustrating to see when it does work, right? Because it's not like it's worse to see that it works sometimes because obviously you want the team to play well as often as possible, but rather it's frustrating knowing what you saw earlier, knowing that could have been potentially resolved way earlier in the game when it mattered.
Speaking of something that mattered, the red zone interception.
Like, I don't know what to say, but like it was not a super well placed pass. KJ Osborne did not do a great job boxing out the defensive back. It led him out of the end zone, which I'm going to keep calling an end zone throw because that's where he was aiming. But like it led him out of the end zone, which meant that if he had caught it, decent chance, and I think that was on 3rd down, decent chance he doesn't score, which is super frustrating. But also, like, what are the odds, man? That sucks. That they just happened to catch it. Like Trevin Howard, who's like their 3rd backup linebacker or something like that. Like, come on. That's frustrating, man.
Yeah, that's frustrating. And all the fumbles as well. And just looking at
3.
the stat line, there's
I can't believe they recovered all of them.
3 fumbles. Really?
Yeah, well, the Rams, sorry, it's Stafford, right? The Rams fumbled once too, but they turned that into a 4th down conversion, I guess. You could do that.
Oh, yeah. And what was great was listening to the announcers be like, yeah, so actually, as it turned out, this really worked because it confused the hell out of the defense who didn't know what was going on. And so Stafford was able to make a sneak. Like, Stafford is many things. A master of the quarterback sneak is not one of them.
Not historically, no.
You could do this play 100 times. With this fumble, It's against the Vikings, so I'm assuming he's going to make 60 of them. But, like, on paper, he shouldn't make more than 2.
Right, exactly.
Just ridiculous. Also from Dr. Aaron Matson, do you agree with Justin Jefferson's statement that red zone play calling wasn't aggressive enough, or was it Kirk being too conservative?
The play calling could have been maybe a little bit more aggressive. The runs up the gut and stuff like that, weren't working, and I understand why people, seeing that not work for a bunch of the game, wanting that to go away. Fine, I get it. That doesn't bother me as much because like I know that there's a lot of value in red zone running, and I know that predicting how well someone's going to run from play to play is pretty difficult to do. So I don't hate that as much. But in terms of what Cousins was doing, yeah, I think that he was taking the wrong throws. I think that he wasn't throwing with enough depth. I think when pass plays were called, he was much too comfortable taking some pretty cheap throws.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Just, and of course now it leads to every sports writer with a Twitter account to be like, Justin Jefferson is upset, and like every Vikings receiver that's ever been worth half a damn, he's going to want to leave. It's like, dude, this is the closest to like being upset that Justin Jefferson has the ability to be right now. Like, he knows something's wrong. It's just ridiculous.
All right. Mike Zimmer did a pretty decent job of attempting to kind of close down on that, because I think if this were a concern, Zimmer probably would have said something like, I'm going to talk to him or something like that. But instead he was just like, no, he just wants to like win. I don't know. That's all he was really communicating.
Yeah. Justin Jefferson doesn't even do the wide receiver diva tweet thing yet. So let's all just enjoy that until he re-signs, gets
goes to enough position meetings where he can finally figure out how to tweet like a wide receiver.
Yep, exactly. And then we'll be, sitting there with the tweets about daggers and everybody like, okay, well, he's finally
we saw this coming. Yep.
Yeah, we all saw this coming, exactly. Let's go to Colin Olson, who asks, most fans agree that Cousins' $33 million per year salary is too much. Can you evaluate exactly how much he is overpaid?
For that, the kind of the simplest way, which is not a super simple thing to do, but the simplest way is to take all of the quarterback valuations, whether you think that that's in terms of this year's cap hit, or if you think that's in terms of approximate average value, or if you think that's in terms of functional guaranteed, or whatever you want to do, right? However you want to take a look at how the league values quarterbacks this year. Take that, line it all up, list it 1 through 7 or 1 through 32 or whatever you want to do. And then rank all the quarterbacks in terms of how much you want them on their team, how much you want them on your team, and then rank those 1 to 32 and match those up, right? And that's maybe the easiest way to do it. And Cousins, by a lot of measures, is like 4th or 5th in terms of quarterback valuation by the league. I think he's like 2nd in cap hit this year or something like that, but that's kind of like a weird quirk of the way that some negotiating has worked. Like next year, he'll have a $45 million cap hit and he'll be 4th. Right, like it jumps up by $12 million in cap hit, and he's not. He moves down the rankings or something. So whatever valuation metric you use, he's like 4th or 5th, maybe 3rd. Then you take a look at kind of the best way to rank quarterbacks, according to your individual ranking or according to some other metric. And unfortunately, if you take a look at the one at over the cap, they use PFFs, and the PFF had Kirk Cousins as the number 1 quarterback in the NFL by their grading system for a little while. Eric Eager, who no one needs to be really reminded is not the biggest fan of Kirk Cousins on the planet, as he constantly digs on him on Twitter, on his own podcast with George Horry at the PFF Forecast, was on the Too High podcast with Seth Galina and Deontay Lee, which I highly recommend. It's a really fantastic podcast. It's another Pro Football Focus podcast. It does not really focus that much on the grades. They don't really care that much about it. It doesn't focus on analytics or the data. It's 2 football guys talking about X's and O's and then using kind of the PFF's remarkable database to kind of supplement what they're talking about. So they'll talk about like, hey, I know Daniel Sorensen is taking a lot of heat on Twitter. Here's why he's actually good. Let's talk about the Chiefs, the way they line up and stuff like that. Anyway, I strongly recommend that podcast. Eric Eager was a guest on that podcast. And, they were talking about Kirk Cousins, and Deontay Lee is not a huge fan of Cousins. Seth Galina is a little bit more attuned to the way Cousins plays. And And they asked, and Eric mentioned Cousins is great, and he brings up the idea that Cousins has managed to find a way, accidentally of course, to find a way to game the PFF system. And it's not like a huge loophole in the system, or that they have to like go back and change everything they do or anything like that. It's just like, hey, a quarterback that throws short and completes a lot of passes will have gamed passer rating, right? Like Christian Ponder's passer rating was always higher than his actual effectiveness on the field. It's just if you build a metric that's sufficiently complicated, some quarterbacks are going to underperform their value to the team but overperform within that metric. It's not that they're chasing the metric, that the metric is bad. It's just that the quirks of various metrics make it such that they overvalue that quarterback relative to their impact on the team. And so right now, Over the Cap, which is pulling PFF data to build an evaluation tool, if you go to their premium section, which of course I pay for so I can answer a mailbag question every couple of weeks about this, they actually have Cousins as slightly underpaid because, again, they're using the PFF data and they have their own valuation system that includes, practical guarantee, true guarantee, average wage, approximate value, cap it, and so on. And it has Cousins as like the fourth or fifth quarterback by that valuation. And by a PFF grade, he is playing just slightly above that, which is very funny. But yeah, I think that in terms of valuation, Cousins is not the fourth or fifth best quarterback in the league. I think it's very easy to say that. You'd much rather have Lamar Jackson, who is not the fourth or fifth best quarterback in the league. You'd much rather have, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, right? Who could be, the fourth or fifth best quarterback in the league. Justin Herbert. Got that game that Josh Allen just had, though. Like, he might be back up above Herbert, right? Like those are guys that are like in this conversation. Joe Burrow just had a 525-yard game against, the backup Ravens defense essentially. But that's a game that I don't think Kirk Cousins ever has. And it's not just the totals; it's the average, right? It's something like 10 yards in attempt or something like that. So those are games that kind of tell you what the character of that quarterback is, and it seems like there's more quarterbacks out there that have a higher desirability to a fan base than Cousins does. Cousins is a good quarterback. I mention this all the time, but whether or not he's good relative to what he provides or how much resources he consumes or how much you have to cater an offense to him, that's a little bit different. But Cousins will get a lot of jobs done. But is he better than Dak Prescott, who I didn't even mention in that bevy of quarterbacks? I don't think so, right? Is he better than Lamar Jackson? No. Is he better than all these other quarterbacks I just mentioned? I don't think so. And so if he's got the fourth or fifth valuation, he is probably overpaid. So is he probably the 10th or 9th best quarterback? He's probably somewhere in there. I might be wrong about one of the quarterbacks I just named, right? He might be better than one of those guys. Maybe he's actually better than Joe Burrow. Maybe he's actually better than Lamar Jackson. I don't know, but somewhere in there, he's there, right? Maybe Matthew Stafford. He's got a higher EPA. I didn't even mention Kyler Murray. So there's all these other quarterbacks that a lot of people would rather have, some because they're younger, not necessarily because they're better right now, but quarterbacks that you might value a little bit more, rather have on your team. And he's fourth or fifth in league valuation. Now, some of that's because players like Kyler Murray are on the rookie contract, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, they're on the rookie contract. But for the most part, if you stack it up and eliminate the rookie contracts and just give them the contracts of the next highest paid people and just stack up the top 32 contracts of quarterback, they would rank above Cousins. So, yeah, Cousins is overpaid for sure. And that limits the Vikings' opportunities to surround him with the kind of talent he needs to be surrounded by in order to succeed. And so if you're going to have like an Eli Manning or a Jimmy Garoppolo or a Joe Flacco like run to a Super Bowl, some of which, ended up as wins, you need a strong team to help create those opportunities and maximize, any volatility in your favor. The Vikings do have that a little bit on offense, maybe not the offensive line, but like literally every other position is stacked as hell right now. But you don't really necessarily have that on defense. Like some of those teams that I just mentioned that made those runs, they had some pretty interesting defenses. The Vikings don't have that right now. And part of that is because they're cap constrained. And part of that is because of Kirk Cousins. So, Kirk Cousins is definitely overpaid, but like, how much exactly is he overpaid? I think that's a different answer for everybody. Hopefully, I've given you kind of the tools to make kind of that determination yourself. But like, yeah, I'd like Josh Allen right now is valued below Kirk Cousins by the Pro Football Focus, assisted tool that Over the Cap is using right now. That's obviously dumb. Like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, he didn't beat the 3-pass Patriots in 50-mile-per-hour wind, but I bet Cousins wouldn't have either. So, like, I don't know. And Allen actually had a pretty decent game in that matchup, and then his next game against the Patriots was an absolute evisceration. It's one of the best quarterback games I've ever seen. So, yeah, I don't know that I'll ever say that about Cousins.
Well, let's go to Professor Poop, who asks...
Appropriately,
yeah, appropriately. As much as I have enjoyed this season, one of the greatest of all time in terms of raw poopiness, I am concerned that next year might lead to a complete fecal overload. Could lose a lot of pieces, Kirk's huge contract, no cornerbacks, and a probable downgrade at coach. Is there hope? Also, please rank in order of which would be the biggest fecal catastrophe. The Packers make and win the Super Bowl this year and re-sign Rodgers and Adams. The Bears hire Mike Zimmer and win the division with a hope for the Super Bowl. Or Kirk re-signs at 5 years, $225 million.
That's incredible. So that would be Kirk at $45 million a year. Presumably that's at least 3 years guaranteed, but it's Kirk, so it might be 5 years guaranteed. That would free up cap space next year, and maybe you could re-sign some of those corners that you're worried about losing. So there's a silver lining there. I think the worst one is the Packers one. Both because you get the poopiness in February, right? Which none of these occur like in a month, right? Like that's the other one. And then also again in March, when they re-sign Rodgers and Adams, and then of course back again in September when they start playing again. So that would suck. That would absolutely be, I think, at the top of whatever kind of fecal Mohs scale that you're using here. After that, between the Bears hiring Mike Zimmer and succeeding in that scenario, and Kirk re-signing at $45 million, I think the Bears signing Mike Zimmer is poopier, right? Because if Kirk re-signs, you do get that silver lining of improving your cap space situation for next year. You get to see what maybe a coach, maybe an offensive-minded coach, maybe a better offensive mind is able to do with a quarterback like Cousins, who, again, he's a good quarterback, and so you might be able to Jimmy Garoppolo your way into a playoff run, right? So, I mean, I think it's a bad scenario, right? Like, don't do that. Don't re-sign Kirk for $45 million a year for a 5-year contract. But of the three scenarios, that might be the most palatable because there are, like, upsides to it. Whereas, like, with the Bears one, it's like, oh, yeah, Mike Zimmer will unlock Khalil Mack again. Great. Looking forward to that.
Yeah. That's, no. Let's avoid that if we can. Let's go to Beef Brewski, who asks, 2 areas the Vikings have attempted to shore up the offensive line and the secondary via the draft. In both cases, their picks have largely underperformed, i.e. Hughes, Bradbury, Elflein, Dantzler, Gladney. I don't know if you can really put Gladney in this. That seems more like a
form. Yeah,
that's more of a character, legal character issue. Right. Is this a matter of bad luck? That one, or bad scouting? Maybe. Who do we blame?
So that one's tough. Like you said, the Gladney one is tough to kind of really pin on the Vikings too much. Obviously they employ scouts to do a number of things, one of which is to evaluate, on-field talent. But another one is to do stuff like character investigation and background work. I don't know if there was anything in Gladney's background that would have told us about this. If there was, that's the responsibility of the Vikings to kind of investigate that and do a little bit more research. It does not sound like, from publicly available information at the time, that this was a significant concern for the Vikings. It was actually a bigger concern with Mike Hughes. Not that he had any DV in his history, but he had a couple of off-field incidents where, he got into a fight during a frat party as a freshman at UNC before he got kicked out. It was the reason why he was at UCF, right? And why it was kind of interesting that he started right away despite showing up on campus like a week before the season started. So there was some stuff with Mike Hughes where it was fair to kind of wonder if maybe, there's some stuff underneath the surface you're worried from a character perspective. Not all of these turn into like character concerns. It's just stuff you have to be aware of and, weigh the risks and consequences. I don't know if there was anything like that in Gladney's history. If there was, then the Vikings dropped the ball. If not, then they just got kind of unlucky. For some of these other ones, the Bradbury one is interesting because it very much seems like when he got benched, he got good from both a pass protection and a run blocking evaluation side. Now that I've got his like PFF grades pulled up, his game against Chicago was pretty poor. Pass blocking was fine. Run blocking was pretty bad. And the Rams was bad all around. I am still curious. I don't know if a turnaround is possible, but these are the highest single game grades he has ever achieved. So I want to say that there is something there. Maybe he was just healthy, right? Maybe it was good to have a break, right? So I don't know, but if he puts together like a pretty good game next week, that's kind of worth evaluating a little bit more. We can see, maybe it was just kind of a mentality thing with Garrett Bradbury, in which case that's more of a coaching thing than it is a scouting thing or a luck thing. So and Ezra Cleveland, I think, is playing pretty well at guard. So in the cases of their picks underperforming, I think that there is an element of bad luck. I do think that there is something to be said, like when just a random journalist like me says, hey, actually, it's probably better not to draft Bradbury in round 1. I think that you should draft Elton Jenkins or Eric McCoy round 2. I mean, those are two players that I liked a lot in that draft. And they've both turned out to be like all pro caliber players. I didn't predict that they'd be all pro caliber players. I would have probably asked you to draft them in draft 1 if I could have predicted that, but in round 1. But, the value proposition of those centers, which I viewed Elton Jenkins at the time as a center. Apparently, you can just play any offensive line position you want. The value proposition of those players is better served in the second or third rounds than it was in the first round. You would have been able to get somebody else. So, that is a case of bad strategy more than it is bad scouting. And you just got hit with some bad luck along the way to lose a little bit of value. I think that, like, broadly, this is kind of a bad luck thing. Again, we don't know how Dancer's going to turn out. I think this is broadly a bad luck thing. If you take a look at the bottom of that draft where they drafted Hughes, some of those other cornerbacks did not work out. Like Isaiah Oliver, I think, went to the Falcons, I want to say. He didn't work out. Mike Hughes has had like 2 good games with the Chiefs, but he's mostly been bad. They've benched him, a number of times, and they're on a defensive tear right now, so I think that says a lot. So I don't know that we've got a blanket answer on either of these position areas. Some of these, could end up turning out, right? So like I don't think we've got a great answer here.
Well, next question's from Nick Howard, who asks, when do the Wilfs fire everyone?
Probably right after the Packers game. Or maybe they might let everyone know that they're being let go. Because apparently you don't have to fire people to interview. You just have to let them know that they won't be here next year. So, here's your 2 weeks notice. Make sure you keep turning in excellent work. We know you're motivated to do it. Anyway, we're going to find your replacement.
This whole thing screams of we're going to let, dignity and all that. Like this whole thing just screams of letting him finish his term sort of thing.
Yeah. Letting him reach retirement.
Yeah. Nick Howard also asks, do you think drafting Mond was a grasp at trying to keep a job?
Not really. I don't think that this was like I don't think they figured like, hey, if we draft Kellen Mond, they're going to give us a couple more years of latitude. I don't think that was the thinking there. I genuinely think that they thought, as we keep going, we're going to have to find a way to move on from Cousins. Let's take a couple of shots at quarterback. Here's our favorite here. I don't think it was like a short-term, like job security thing. It might have been a long-term job security thing. Like, hey, 2024, we want to still keep doing this. We should probably have an answer at quarterback. I don't think that this was like a way to say, hey, you can't fire us now. We've got a quarterback waiting in the wings. I don't think that was it.
Or even, Kirk Cousins has been ridiculously sturdy and injury-free for years. We can't just bank on that for the entirety of our careers too.
Right, exactly, yeah. Which, man, did that get tested, right? When we asked, like, hey, what are you going to do if Sean Mannion goes down? All these quarterbacks are going down. Mike Zimmer said, oh, I've got faith. He's not going to go down. He's fine. He's vaccinated. Which,
you're the coach of the Vikings. Why would you kick that hornet's nest? He was going to be fine if you hadn't have said anything at that presser.
I cannot believe that. At the time, they were going through virtual protocols, so maybe he meant during that period of time. We hashed this out last week, but like the fact that he actually ended up on the COVID-19 protocols is, I hope he's fine. But if he's not fine, this sentence isn't true. But if he is fine, insanely funny. It's so funny.
It's funny from like a universe standpoint,
right?
In that we're all like, we are but pawns to the great magnet. That the great magnet controls us all, and the great magnet looked at this particular instance and went, "Oh, I know exactly what's going to happen here." Anybody who listened to that presser knew. People had tweeted out predictions. Oh, by Tuesday, no, by Saturday, this is going to be a real thing. Why do you tempt fate?
The hubris, especially for someone as snake bitten as Zimmer. Like, I just feel like you should know. You should know.
The Vikings are not to be trusted. Like, do I need to say? Like, does somebody just need to say that to him? He should know. Like, those should be his last words. Like, you know, he's on his deathbed. He's got the snow globe. He says the Vikings are not to be trusted, and just rolls off the bed and breaks, and then we try to find out a story about his sled. Like, this is exactly how this is supposed to go. Ridiculous. Why do you do that?
The sled was named AA Gap Blitz. Oh.
Yeah, see?
Oh my God. The mistakes that we made along the way trying to interpret that.
Yeah. Well, let's keep on the coaching thing. We got a couple of questions on coaching. Devin asks, assuming the organization goes through a coaching change, are there any assistants you think the next regime should try to keep? Patterson and McCardle come to mind.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because it's not just that coaches want to keep their own assistants. Assistants that are on relatively high demand, which Patterson and McCardle will be, get to choose their environment, right? And if McCardle, I believe, was forced out by Urban Meyer. And so he might, for example, just value a coaching staff that talks about loyalty and demonstrates that it values loyalty. So wherever Mike Zimmer goes next, McCardle might go there. Andre Patterson has been paired with Mike Zimmer for ages now. I mean, they of course have had coaching careers where they haven't been together, but they have been like attached at the hip for a lot of their coaching career. And so he might go with Mike Zimmer. So yeah, sure, offer a bucket of money to Andre Patterson, but like, who knows if that's going to work out for you? I do think that those two are probably the best examples of coaches that you might want to keep. Personally, I would love for them to keep Ryan Ficken just because he's an open book. That makes my job easier. I don't know that he's, any good, but the Vikings have had the good special teams for the first time in a long time. So, it couldn't hurt to try and look into that. It seems like that's been a difficult thing to try and secure. So, keeping Ryan Ficken just as a coordinator overall would not be bad. Other position coaches besides Patterson and McCardle, I don't know that we got anything out of the tight ends coach or the offensive line coach. I don't know that. I think that the current Vikings quarterback coach, which if I just take a look at the Vikings staff website, just blanking on the name. I think if you take a look at, Andrew Janocko, he might be kind of like the next, he's around with every staff. He could become a Stefanski if he's groomed for the right way. And, he's kind of, the offensive coordinator, offensive mind in waiting. So maybe they keep Andrew Janocko around. But, I don't know that we've learned much. I guess Phil Rauscher, right? Because the issue has been Rick Dennison's offensive line. Like, obviously, having Oli Udoh at guard has not worked out. But Ezra Cleveland improving, that probably means something. Drafting Christian Darrisaw seems to be playing well. That seems to be helping. If Bradbury does indeed turn around, I think that maybe we could take a look at what Rauscher and Ben Steele, the assistant offensive line coach, are doing. I don't know that they're doing so well or well enough that you would say, hey, we got to keep this guy over, whoever the next coach wants to bring in for sure. But it's something you want to think about because, like, the offensive line development this year does seem to be a little bit better than it has been in previous years. Otherwise, yeah, I don't know that there's anything that you can get from the defensive back coaching or anything like that makes you think that, you've got everything you need.
And if we're talking about special teams, since you brought up special teams, watching that kick return touchdown or punt return touchdown, I believe, was just so quintessentially Vikings. If I have one thing to say about this game that I cannot say about basically any game this year, is that it was nice to have a loss that was a real loss. Like, nothing really screwy happened. Like, this was a normal loss. This wasn't some, like, last play crap. Like, no. This was a real thing. It was almost magical. Like, this is... We've had, two like, normal games this year now?
There's a stress involved with competitive games. It just kind of wears on you. Like I just my heart needs a blowout win or a blowout loss. Just like, give me time to recover. I cannot watch this team for 60 minutes on the precipice of victory or defeat. If they recover that onside kick, I'm going to be so mad at them for succeeding. Like, there's definitely a there. I get you, James.
Yeah, it was so nice. I think I even tweeted it out. It's like, my only take is that this was a normal loss, and I don't know what to do now. Like, this is. Do I yell? I had moments where I was like excited at what was going on the TV, but otherwise, like, oh, well, the Vikings are going to lose this, and it's like the second quarter.
Great.
This is perfectly fine. I can watch the rest of this just knowing that that's what's going to happen. Kane asks, who is the best possible head coach next season, and who's the most likely head coach next season?
We're going to do a lot of head coach analysis if indeed Mike Zimmer gets fired, which technically we don't know that that's the case. We do a lot of head coach analysis. We're going to bring in guests of teams that who cover teams that last employed that head coach. We're going to ask them questions, but honestly, we're not going to know the answer. Some really great offensive coordinators have become really bad head coaches. Some really kind of weird coaching hires that you don't really understand have become good head coaches. So I don't know who the best one is. The ones that interest me a lot include Kellen Moore. I guess I'm a little interested in Byron Leftwich. I think that's kind of interesting. The college stuff is done, so we can't really think about, a college head coach. That's all that interesting. Maybe Campbell from Iowa State. But if he's still there, maybe I just missed he got hired somewhere else. I don't know. But in terms of like the coaching, the next hot coaching names, like, Kellen Moore would be fun. Brian Dable would be interesting if he's like administrative enough. The problem is like the skills that you need to be a good head coach and the skills you need to be a good offensive coordinator are just like not all that related. And so like saying, hey, Brian Dable turned Josh Allen around, like that's really impressive. And the offense that they're running is like really interesting, and they can't run the ball, so they don't. But if they can run the ball, they will. And they adapt their game plans to their opponents. And like, look at all, like, that's cool, right? I want that in an offensive coordinator for sure, 100%. The adaptability stuff is translatable to head coach, but like none of the other stuff I said is. So I don't know who the best head coaching candidate is out there. The ones that interest me the most are maybe those two, but maybe Todd Bowles. I don't like, which I know that Vikings fans don't want a defensive head coach, but like, Todd Bowles would be an interesting one. I don't know. Jim Caldwell. I don't care. These could all be good. Like Jim Caldwell, like had like 3 above 500 seasons for the Detroit Lions. Like the only time in history outside of the Barry Sanders years. Like that guy's probably a lot better than we thought he was.
He just needed to go to a place that, was going to be able to win occasionally.
And which the Vikings have shown that they can win occasionally.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know. There's a lot of answers to that question. Who's the most likely? I think it's going to be an offensive coach. It might be a young up-and-comer because the Wilfs missed out in Stefanski, and maybe they don't want to miss out on the next one. So I'm going to shoot my shot and say it's Kellen Moore, but, I don't know.
All right, next question is going to be from Christopher Wiley, who asks, grumblings around the Vikings media suggest that people believe Zimmer will be gone after the season, but Spielman will remain with the team. How much of the season's inconsistency, quarterback situation, lack of depth, can be laid at the GM's feet?
The lack of depth, for sure, plays a role. It's tough to disaggregate the two, though, right? Because the way the Vikings constructed their roster this year has a lot to do with the demands that Mike Zimmer puts on the front office to acquire certain types of players. Like, I don't think it was smart to sign 2 nose tackles regardless of like kind of the theory of being able to lighten the box and actually play the pass better without having to worry about the run with your linebackers. Like I get it, I still don't think it was smart to pay 2 nose tackles. I don't think they do that if Mike Zimmer's not the head coach, but Rick Spielman is still the general manager. So how much do you blame him for that, right? Should they have spent like a 3rd round pick on a backup running back? He's a fine backup running back, better than a lot of them. But like, you know, that's probably not a good use of resources. Well, would they have done that if they didn't have such a heavy run first philosophy? I don't know. So like, how much do you put on the GM? Probably a fair amount in terms of rounding out the depth chart within the constraints of the way that the team is, organized, which is a development or a feature of the head coach more than it is the general manager. You just have to take a look at what the team was like under Brad Childress with Rick Spielman. It looked a lot different. So yeah, I think that a lot of these depth issues, the way that the Vikings have handled losses and injuries and stuff like that, that is on Rick Spielman. I talked about it a couple of episodes ago. It was a different loss. I forget which loss I talked about it, but there is a significant portion of the blame that does fall on Spielman for not being able to continuously find talent. Like the lack of depth at cornerback, I called it like a luck issue, right? Like I don't know that he would have been able to figure out the dance lyric and that thing, but like it's ultimately he's accountable to having picked my cues. He's ultimately accountable to having picked Cameron Dantzler if Dantzler doesn't turn out. And so their inability to field a cornerback group and having to dip into free agency and take a chance on Bashad Breeland, overspend on Patrick Peterson, whatever, that's his fault. And having to overspend on Patrick Peterson and Dalvin Tomlinson means that you can't do some of the other things that you might want to do, like retain Anthony Harris, who, if he had stayed in Minnesota, might have been good, right? It might not have allowed you to go after an offensive lineman that would have been a really good fit in free agency, right? Like if the Vikings could have acquired something like when the Browns acquired Jack Conklin, the right tackle. If the Vikings could have acquired something like that, or the few times the Green Bay Packers dip into free agency along their offensive line, it seems to work out for them. Billy Turner is a good example of that. Or again, Dennis Clark, the right tackle from the Tennessee, is working out for them. Whereas the Vikings have decided to value development along their offensive line. And so that results in Oli Udoh being on the roster for a while, even though they have so many tackles on the roster, you don't know what to do with them, but not enough guards. And so now you have to move a bunch of tackles to guard. And now you've got Ezra Cleveland who's a tackle playing guard, and I've got Oli Udoh as a tackle playing guard. And Mike Zimmer said when he moved him to left tackle for those 2 games that he's actually more of a tackle than he is a guard. And like, what were we doing this whole time? Why don't we have any freaking guards on the roster? That's a Spielman issue. And now there's like 8 tackles on the roster. There's still 8 tackles on the roster. Like that's a Spielman issue. Like trade one of them, man. Like if Oli Udoh is such a valuable tackle, find a guard. Like you don't get bonus points for having the league's best 5th right tackle. So some of that has to do with Spielman. So that plays a pretty big role, but it is difficult to disaggregate how much of that has to do with like the way Zimmer wants to build a team.
Well, let's go to the next question, which comes from Michael, who says, am I wrong for valuing stability and always fielding a competitive team over a potential coaching upgrade, but likely downgrade given the league-wide trends? The Vikings will continue to be a top 2 NFC North team, number 1 if Rodgers truly does leave Green Bay.
That doesn't make you like a bad person. It just means you value something a little bit different than the rest of the fan base. I mean, like you watch the team to watch the team and you enjoy whatever you want from the team. Like it doesn't make you a bad person at all. I think that there is absolutely a risk that moving on from Zimmer results in a worse team. That's exactly what happened when the Bengals moved on from Marvin Lewis, right? They did not get a better team for doing it. But if they wanted a chance to win the Super Bowl, they needed to take the risk to get worse in order to get better. We've talked about this a number of times, especially with regards to Mike Zimmer. If he is indeed capped, which, I mean, the evidence suggests that a guy who's good at coaching in the regular season will end up being a good coach in the postseason, even if he hasn't been so far. But, like, I understand that feeling is really hard to shake, so I get it. If it's the case that he's capped, or if it's the case that the game is, passed him by, and if it's the case that he should be retiring because he's, at that age or whatever, the Vikings are much more likely to get worse. But the only opportunity that they have to get better is to eat that risk. And so if you've got a 2-3 chance to get worse or a 1-3 chance to get better, if your only goal is to win the Super Bowl and a first round exit is the same as picking like 7th in the draft, then absolutely you should move on. But if you value these competitive games, if you value being able to consistently threaten to make the postseason, even if you don't always do it, even if you do it functionally every other year except this year, but if you always field a competitive team, then there's no reason to move on from Mike Zimmer. I don't think that makes you a bad fan. It makes you value some things that a lot of other fans don't. But it does mean that your weekly viewing experience is much more likely to be enjoyable, next year, right? If the team goes your way, you know that next year you're probably going to see a bunch of competitive games. If the team doesn't go your way, you know that next year you're probably going to see the team falter a lot, because even if they get a good coach, that the team is not going to be built around that coach. They're not going to be able to build what they want to build. I mean, Mike Zimmer's 2014 was much better than Leslie Frazier's 2013, but it wasn't like a good team. And so, yeah, no, it doesn't make you a bad fan. It just makes you a different fan than a lot of people, which is like fine. But I want people to be clear that, yeah, it's hard to find coaches better than Mike Zimmer, but that's the job now. So be prepared in knowing that it's going to be difficult to find a coach better than Mike Zimmer. Be prepared knowing that the Vikings are probably going to get worse, but this is their only shot at getting better.
Here's when you know it's time to move on from Mike Zimmer. When you read the "Our Team Sucks" thing from Drew Magary, and you're looking through it, and you don't see the actual humor in it, you're going, no, he's right. Like, when you're going through, like, because Why Your Team Sucks has this great section on like the coaching and the quarterback and all this, a history of the year of the team for the last year. But when it reaches the coaching part, and you're sitting there just going, no, I think that's accurate. I think that's accurate. I think that's when it's probably time to move on from your coach. And we've hit that. The cult of personality is dead. I think it may be time to let Zimmer go. Let's go to Zen Cupid, who asks, for Arif's curse practitioner corner, maybe finding out how to uncurse the Vikings is the wrong solution. Would it be possible for all of us to band together and collectively curse all of the other teams in the NFL? If everyone is cursed, this surely levels the playing field, no?
Man, if everyone is cursed, then no one is cursed. No one is cursed, that means a level playing field. I get where you're coming from, but it just feels like the Vikings would loophole themselves out of this, right? Like, it feels like if you cursed everybody...
If you cursed everybody, the Vikings would end up getting double cursed.
Right.
That's how that would work. Like, there's no way around it.
Well, and here's the thing. The Vikings would be known as the curse breakers for other teams. Like, that's the problem. Because
is that like Good Luck, the movie Good Luck Chuck?
Yes.
The Vikings are that.
Yeah. So, like, other teams will circle the Vikings on their calendar and say, that's our get-right game. That's the game where we bring the goat and sacrifice it so we can finally get rid of this curse and beat the Vikings, and that'll demonstrate. And so that's, yeah. So the Vikings become the curse breakers, which is the worst curse in a world where everybody is cursed.
In a world where everyone is cursed. Fantastic. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, but since we're in the curse corner, we're starting to go off the rails here. Let's go to Joe Justice, who asks, if COVID happened because of baby witches hexing the moon, what on earth or other supernatural realm did they do to cause all of our misery and suffering this year?
Okay, from a time frame perspective, COVID happened well before baby witches. So I want to be clear, the baby witches caused the murder hornets, not the COVID. But the witch talk community figured out how to unhex Fae and unhex the moon. So the murder hornet problem did not rear its ugly head, except occasionally in the state of Washington, which who goes there anyway? So, just want to be clear about
catching
that.
Strays.
Well, look, you have to call it the state of Washington, otherwise no one knows what you're talking about. I think I've made my point.
There's a lot of self-hatred here for identification purposes, but okay, just keep going.
So, what on earth or any other supernatural realm did they do to cause the misery and suffering? No, the baby witches, if anything, are an unintended consequence of the deep psychic pain the Vikings put upon this earth when Winter Park was founded in 1961. So that's just a ripple effect, right? So I don't think that the baby witches, if anything, the Vikings will have caused whatever causes the specific harms that befall the Vikings later on. It's more like that. Maybe it's because they betrayed the AFL. I don't know. That seems like the best possible curse, but I'm gonna have to hear like Lamar Hunt curse the Vikings or something like that before I say that's the curse.
I just envision, because you're still at your brother's home in Vermont, I just envision Arshad walking by as you're describing this. And just coming in and just doing that like Kevin Hart look. Like the head, like, what? Like, I wanted him to walk.
It's from my football podcast, Rashad. It's fine.
Yeah, we're just talking about baby witches. It's no deal. Chris asks, is an inability to throw left called an Arif or a Trubisky? Who gets the naming rights for that?
Okay, there's no question that it's a Trubisky, right? Because I think, A, I hope my internet legacy is just more than that. But B, I merely recognized a principle extant in the universe. It exists on its own, whether or not you observe it. Which that gets into metaphysics a little bit, but
it's the Higgs Trubisky, like, yeah, it's
right.
It's the particle,
right? And so the fact that it was naturally observed in being named Trubisky, I think that gives it its nomenclature. So that is a Trubisky. I was one of the scientists who recognized it. Much like Charles Darwin, I was not the first person to come up with the Trubisky. Derek Clausen, for example, wrote about it in Football Outsiders before I did. So I guess that makes him the LaSalle of this particular analogy. We're both idiots, so it's not a great analogy. But you know, Isaac Newton and the other guy, also an L name. Anyway, they both discovered calculus at the same time. These things happen. I was just more well known for it because I kept posting, much like Charles Darwin and Isaac Newton.
You should just end this rant with, but listen, I'm no hero. Brian Jellerson asks, if Breland and Chris Thomason got into a fight, who do you think Zim would pull for? And also, would he fight the winner?
Breland and yes.
Like it.
Don't need to explain it any more than that.
Nope. Nolan Kaler asks, all right, I haven't practiced this, so let's see if I can do this. For the Case Cookus Christmas Conundrum Corner, how much concern can Norse coders continue to keep while Case Cookus's Case Cookus capers keep missing coach's game concoctions?
Game concoctions. You were stretching at the end, Nolan.
That you know, that was difficult, but to hit the real stretch at the end here, can this correction be acquired by Case Cookus capturing countless cheers at quarterback, or can Case Cookus cure coach's quarterback concerns that were certainly caused by Kashond Creeland?
Okay, Nolan. Okay.
You didn't land the dismount on that one.
Wow, rough. 9 out of 10.
Jeez, I'm just proud of myself for being able to make it through there.
Yeah, you nailed it.
As much as I could. Resigned Sigh asks, my favorite username of the show, to this week, I'm going to the game at Lambeau. How often do you think I need to shout the Vikings are not to be trusted? Also, is Lambeau overrated or underrated? Can I answer the first one? Probably nothing. You probably don't need to yell that at all. You know why? Because I don't think the Vikings are going to end up with a substantial lead this game. I had to yell it at Baltimore because the Vikings got out to a huge lead. Like, I don't think that's going to be the case this game.
Cookus.
Thank you.
Yeah.
However, Arif, Lambeau, overrated or underrated?
It's both. I think that there is something to be said about knowing that there's a historic property in, a hobby or or fandom that you have or whatever, right? If you're really invested in an activity, and there's something historic about it that like a lot of mythology has been built around, a lot of actual history of that hobby or activity or whatever has evolved in and has persisted throughout. That hasn't changed very much. There's always value in that. The first time I went to Lambeau, mind you, I didn't have to sit in the stadium, which changes a lot of things, which I'll discuss in a second, was phenomenal. Like part of it was I felt like I had made it as a sports writer, right? Because I was there as a member of the press, and it was really cool to look out and see it. But it just like Green Bay at night, you see this night game, you see Lambeau lit up, you see kind of the backdrop behind it, you see all, and it means something because of everything that's been kind of built into you, both explicitly and implicitly through football culture, that this place is important, and so therefore it is important, and so that feeling is, I think, underrated. I think people want to talk about the actual physical qualities of the stadium way too much when they talk about how Lambeau is, overrated or whatever. And like, you can't dismiss that. You can't dismiss that this place has existed in some form or another throughout the history of the NFL, something that a lot of people like me care a lot about. And so I think from that perspective, it is underrated. I think that hosting football games there 16 or I guess 8 or 9 times a season or whatever, and going to them and sitting in those seats is overrated as hell. Those seats suck. And there's a reason most stadiums have changed. This one remains unchanged, which is very cool, but that doesn't make it practical. And so when you see like a bunch of stadium rankings, they value some of these qualities more than others. And so in some stadium rankings, some authors will always put Lambeau at number 1, right? They're like, it's a historic place. You can't replace it. It's never changed. I mean, it's changed, but it's never like really cowed to the demands of modernization. It doesn't have the same profit motive because it doesn't have an owner or whatever, right? And so it maintains a mystique and a history that these other ones don't. Like US Bank Stadium was built on the grave of the Metrodome, who nobody really considered a historic stadium anyway. That was a replacement for the Met, which is now in IKEA, I think. It's somewhere in the Mall of America area, right?
Well, yeah, it's kind of that whole area, yes, but it's less IKEA and more like it used to be the Nickelodeon area. I forget what it is. No, I think now it is the Nickelodeon area of Mall of America, because they still have the chair up there from the home run.
Oh, hell yeah. But yeah, so like, these stadiums have moved, like, Jerry World's in like Arlington, right? So like, this hasn't, right? Like in Soldier Field's kind of the same way. But because we called Green Bay Titletown or whatever, like, so some will rank that stadium number 1. And if you're a fan who wants to visiting stadiums, right, to visit away stadiums for the experience, Lambeau should rank pretty highly. If you want to go to a game every week, Lambeau should rank really lowly. It sucks as a game day experience. The history stuff, that washes over you the 3rd or 4th time. So it is both overrated and underrated.
It's funny that you mentioned Soldier Field, considering that they did so many things for that last upgrade that they actually had to take it off of the historic places list for the state of Illinois. Like they had messed it up so badly. Like, oh, it still sucks. Also, it's no longer historic Soldier Field, so you get to deal with that. Jesse from New York asks, I'm just wondering if I get a special Viking award in the Hell League for quietly having a great season, working my way up to the number 2 seed, finally having a glimmer of hope, only to be blown out in the first round of the playoffs. Or is it my own fault for not breaking the optimism shotgun glass?
It's both, but it is very Vikings to not break the optimism shotgun glass. So, you had an underrated season. We didn't talk about your team very often in the Hell League, which is usually a very good thing. So congrats on that. And you put yourself in a position to have a really successful season, and you boofed it. That seems pretty Vikings to me.
Yeah, that's a few things are more Vikings, quite frankly. You should be proud. I'm proud that the Norse code is represented in there's technically 5 Norse code leagues, including the Hell League, and Norse code is represented in the semifinals or finals in 3 of those leagues. Arif is technically not involved in any of them, but as a result of being associated with Norse code, a win for one of us ends up being a win for all of us, which drove Dusty nuts. But that's the
precedent has been set largely to tick off Dusty, but is now the case.
Yeah. Sure. We're at demolition rules as far as the WWF tag team champions are concerned. We got a 3-man thing here for a tag team. Like this, we're good. We're rolling with it. Eddie Crane asks our first question, and this is not quite B-related yet. He asks, would you give up this year's first-round pick for Jonathan Allen or Daron Payne?
Certainly not both. No. I mean, Jonathan Allen's like really good, but like also no. But also I could see the Vikings doing it, which would be sad but funny, but sad but funny.
Well, let's visit Arif's beekeeping corner, shall we? First of the beekeeping stuff, my parents' neighbor passed away last spring. He was a beekeeper, and his wife didn't want to deal with trying to sell his equipment, so she gifted it all to me. I am now in possession of enough hardware to make several more colonies, maybe as much as 8. My question is this: given Arif's extensive experience with beekeeping, how many hives can someone reasonably expect to maintain without crossing over from hobby to small business venture? I enjoy this, but I'm not sure I'm ready to turn this into a side hustle.
Okay, how many hives before the hobby becomes a small business? Seems like when do you ask for help kind of question. The number of beehives it takes to make a living is fairly enormous. According to noted academic website beekeeperfacts.com, it would take at least 500 beehives to be able to make it as a profitable full-time beekeeper. So this would be at best a cottage industry, much like making preserves on the side after you come home from work and selling them to your friends. So it would not be a full-time income. But it's tough. The notion out there seems to be around 200 hives, but beekeeperfacts.com slaps this down, says realistically, most beekeepers, even with 200 to 300 hives, are not able to rely on beekeeping profits as a full-time income. They require some other form of secondary income. So 8 seems like a very useful hobby to have. It's still not a business, but I guess as soon as you feel like you need to hire someone on a regular basis to do work for you, that's probably it. Because, a business is not defined by whether or not it's profitable. Jesus Christ, no, it's not. But, whether or not it runs like a business. So that seems to be the thing. I would say you're still pretty close to it being a hobby, just is now consuming more and more of your time.
Well, that's the whole idea, isn't it? Like, when does the side hustle become less of like, this is just a fun thing and more of a real project? Like, how many hours out of your week does this end up sucking up, where it stopped being like, oh, this is something I'm just doing because I really like it, to, all right, I actually really have to do all of this now.
Yeah, the YouTuber's dilemma.
Yeah, speaking as somebody who's going through a bunch of stuff to make two clip shows for the end of the year, I have this conundrum every December. So it's fun to deal with. Also from Eddie Crane, do I dare introduce Russian bees into my predominantly Italian community, or would this be just asking for trouble? Please advise.
I don't know why I would be asking for trouble. Bees don't see nationality. It's like a nationality thing. So in previous episodes of Norse Code, we have discussed the findings of other beekeeping resources. These are not the official stances of Norse Code, of other beekeeping resources that have argued that there are incompatibility issues with certain breeds. That's the word I'm going to use, breeds of bees.
Previously discussed as bee races, yes.
In some of these publications, for sure. Yes, that is what they are called in some of the resources I've consulted. Now, phrases like Italians are robbers did pop up in some of these websites. And also that there might be some kind of issue with Russian bees and Italian bees. So I looked into forums where people had actually tried to integrate Russian bees and Italian bees together. Sometimes they would take a queen from a Russian beehive and try to put it into a queenless colony of Italian bees, or vice versa. Sometimes they would try to integrate some Russian bees and Italian bees, and the results are mixed just because the scents are a little bit different. They might treat some of these as intruders. They might not. One beekeeping resource that I looked at, which I'm going to look at a lot more often now because it agrees with me politically, which means it is, of course, true factually, is beesource.com. Please do not look at any other posts from beesource.com. I have no idea if there are maybe some white supremacists on the website. Who knows?
But I do wonder if white supremacist policies involving the bee races would have anything purity and all of that would have anything to do with quality as far as the honey that's produced. I have to ask.
You do not have to ask. Anyway, in 2006, Beecron posted, I agree on the acceptance angle. So this forum is about this question, and almost everybody in the thread agreed that actually, in their experience, that integrating these hives is actually a lot simpler than a lot of people initially were. A lot of people were wary. I agree in the acceptance angles. When I first started beekeeping, I was actually able to be there when my first packages were shaken into the cage. We were shaking Italians, Carnies, just about everything in the apiary. My gut reaction was, this can't be good, mixing all these races. Again, I'm quoting. I was assured nobody has taught the bees about racism yet. If only we could be as accepting. So it seems like the bees don't accept your social constructions of their breeds. If they get along, they get along.
Sometimes it's good to play the hits. I like your new stuff, don't get me wrong, but sometimes it's just comforting to hear
we got to talk about the bees.
We gotta hit the bees. We gotta hit the bee races. Let's end this with some Don from Ohio stuff. Don from Ohio asked, just a reminder, this isn't really a question, so this is going to annoy Dusty. Just a reminder, the Vikings have not played a complete game since my sorry butt was in Hawaii. Aren't you guys done experiencing enough pain and misery? Don't you want this team to succeed and win a Super Bowl? It does involve exiling Don from Ohio from the lower 48, which I had made a comment. All Thomasons and Brelands, they could get together on this and believe in it. So why can't anybody else? We should just get Don off the lower 48.
Well, yeah, okay. So I agree broadly with the idea of kicking Don out of the continent. I don't know that should be treated as a reward for him, right? Because then he gets to go to Hawaii. What if his problem is simply his presence in the United States and Hawaii, or in the mainland, and Hawaii was just kind of a lucky happenstance that turned out to be when the Vikings last played a complete game? We should run this scientifically and put Don in any part of the farthest reaches of the earth and see how the Vikings do that week. So sometimes, we could put Don in Angola, both the prison in Louisiana and also the country in Africa, and see how the Vikings do.
Don's adventures in Cambodia.
Right. Yeah, exactly. We could see, hey, how's your mountain climbing, Don? Would you like to go up Everest? Let's see how the Vikings do then. Any number of possibilities. The Ural Mountains between, European Russia and Asian Russia. I mean, that sounds great. What about the steppe in Mongolia? That sounds fantastic.
Things are about to kick off in Ukraine. Why not?
Yeah,
why not have Don over there to help?
Have you considered a secondary job working for Vice? I bet they would love to have somebody on the ground in Ukraine.
This is This is all working out for this is all working out for Don. Also, for Arif's breakfast etiquette, Luke Braun recently posted a picture of himself pouring orange juice into his cereal. Who does this? What plausible explanation could there be for this abhorrent behavior? For clarification, so I get a lot of crap for being exhausted and accidentally putting milk in my cereal.
You mean accidentally putting water in your cereal?
Oh, sorry, accidentally putting water in my cereal.
Yeah, the issue is when you put water, because that's not supposed to be there. As much as you insist the water is supposed to go in there,
I didn't say water was supposed to be in there. I said it was exhausted and it was an accident. But the point is, Luke puts orange juice in his cereal and does it intentionally.
No, this is okay. So first of all, Luke is posting an extremely old internet meme. This is not him doing it. And you've all fallen for it, and he is laughing at you, and we should not validate that kind of behavior by pretending that he did this himself and is actually taking on the brunt. This is old internet lore. If you're poisoned in 33 or whatever like me, you'll have recognized it. He just wants to make people mad, and he has successfully made Don mad. He has kind of made James mad, and we have let him be successful, and we should not. Don't let him post really old internet memes before we even call them memes, and let them trick you.
Let's just the policy here. Let's just not let Luke be a success.
Yeah, that's actually a good blanket policy. Anything that Luke wants to have happen should not happen. And if that means the Vikings don't win games, that means the Vikings don't win games. The point here is that Luke is bad and should feel bad always.
This is taking a serious turn, considering I still refer to him as a friend of the show when he came on.
What of the show? He was on the show?
He was on in August. Remember? There was a wine bottle? I
do not remember.
Yeah, that. Finally, from Don from Ohio. Oh, good, we get some closure on the Christmas stuff. Finally, from Don from Ohio. FYI, guys, after the wife and I opened Christmas presents, she did acknowledge I knew that I saw the entire order of my gifts without me telling her. So she knew that he had seen everything. She was not mad at me, I'm sure. More at herself. Maybe. My question to Arif, like I want James to comment on this. You know what? Fair. She wants. I get it. She wants me to get rid of all of my old Vikings t-shirts. They are several years old and stained and have bleach stains, whatever. But I am blowing this off because I actually love how they look and are comfortable. Should I do this to appease her, or my solution, buy really cheap and tacky looking t-shirts and wear them to deflect her from her original mission of me getting rid of those Vikings shirts?
Oh, that second thing is not going to work. Once she thinks of something that she wants to change about your wardrobe, she will remember that thing, especially if the point of those shirts, of having those shirts, is to wear them, because she'll remember them every time you wear them. So finding new, more awful shirts, a practice I generally love, to deflect from this will not work. So I want to put that out there. That's not going to happen. Second, you could respond to this head on. I know that this is unusual relationship advice, to be direct and forthright in what you're looking for and what you're seeking in the relationship, but you could do that. Maybe even make a compromise, say, hey, look, I understand that, some of these shirts, they don't look good or whatever, but, they hold a particular value to me, both sentimental and also they're really comfortable. So I'd like to keep them. They're, worn in and stuff like that. I don't want to give them to Goodwill and buy new shirts that are not worn in and, whatever. Right. And I like the style and you can't find the style anymore. They hold a lot of value to me personally. Maybe you'll have to give up some of the shirts and only keep some of them or whatever, but just be direct about what you like about the shirts and maybe she'll understand. I feel like that's the thing to do in a relationship.
Yeah. So here's my thought.
Okay.
Foreboding evil laughter. You're not going to win this, but there are alternatives to losing. So why not try to convince? If these shirts have to go away and they're comfortable, everything. One of the more popular things to do with old T-shirts is turn them into like quilts and stuff, why not see if you can pivot that into something that could be recycled and still could be used? You still get access to them, but they're not, they're not something you get to wear all the time. So it ends up being just something that you have as like available. You don't throw them out. They have sentimental value or comfort value to you, and they still can end up getting used for like a quilt or something. Just a thought.
So these do not contradict each other. You could try the first thing, and if that doesn't work, try the second thing.
And when that stops working, you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and get all new shirts of different varieties, and I'll see if I can get the turkey shirt on there for next year. So enjoy yourself and the Norse Code experience. That's going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Arif, what do you have to plug?
I've got a piece at The Athletic coming up about how the Rams game really encapsulates everything frustrating about the Viking season. And then after that, I might have a piece coming up about the way Kirk Cousins plays quarterback, just kind of generally.
All right. Well, that's going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. We'll be back later this week with an interview with Justice Mosqueda. I cannot wait to see how he breaks everything, as is tradition. So, for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember, the Vikings are not to be trusted. And we'll be back later this week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of The Athletic, and he can be found at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed, at NorseCodeDN, or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merchandise. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
Hey, all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.